约翰·基恩，澳大利亚悉尼大学政治学教授，专注于民主研究，出版《生死民主：公共生活与晚期资本主义》、《民主与媒体衰退》等专著。本次论坛，约翰·基恩演讲的题目是“现代性与专业知识：西方视角”。
大家下午好，我是 John Keane。谢谢 Professor 郭中华教授，非常荣幸能来到 the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences， 很高兴见到你们。I'm very honored to be with you. My subject in this brief session is experts, 专家, and expertise, 专业知识. And under the title of Modernity and Expertise, Western Perspectives, I want to present to you, very briefly, 4 points. First, I want to say something about the history of the key terms expert and expertise, their changing meanings and their links to considerations of good government. Secondly, I want to say something about a radical shift of meaning in the keyword expert. About 100 years ago, a shift of meaning that you can find in the work of Werner Heisenberg, the quantum physicist. Third, I want to say something about Max Weber and his understanding of expertise and the problems with his interpretation. And fourth, I want to put to you a rather old-fashioned, but it seems to me plausible set of reasons why experts are of functional importance, vital functional importance in an age of cascading crises, of COVID-19, and in an era where good government is becoming ever more important. First point. Some of you will know that in the 19th century, in Europe, in the Atlantic region, the expert came to mean someone who was a man of knowledge, someone who had a full grasp of the facts of the world, someone who knew reality, someone who was the carrier, so to say, of 真相, of 真理, of absolute truth, of 事实, of facts, of 真的, the real, of the really true. This understanding of the expert as someone who was a substitute for the priest, someone who was a man of knowledge of the world, was typically from the 1820s onwards counterposed to the struggle for democracy. Democracy was denounced as rule of the ignorant. This was an old understanding that stretched all the way back to Plato, for instance. And in opposition to this rule of the unwashed, ignorant people, experts put themselves forward as carriers of the truth of the world. This is an understanding that, for example, you will find in John Stuart Mill, who, when reflecting on whether workers should have a vote, suggested that unskilled workers should have 1 vote and people with university educations, like us, should have 6 votes. The whole idea was that the expert was a barrier against the rule of the ignorant. The expert was someone who was a substitute for the man of God, the priest. Secondly, it was around 100 years ago that a major reconsideration of this older understanding of scientific expertise took place. And it is in the writings of Werner Heisenberg, one of the most important quantum physicists, but you can find it also in the work of the Danish physicist Niels Bohr. You will find a redefinition of the expert. What does the expert mean for Heisenberg? It means someone who knows that they do not know everything. The true expert is someone who knows about the worst mistakes that can be made in their field, and someone who warns others that they do not know everything about the world, and that therefore humility, based on their experience, becomes super important. This understanding of expertise as synonymous with 智慧, with wisdom, picked up a much older meaning in early European modernity, where the expert was someone who was experienced in their subject matter, who was willing to experiment. Notice the words experiment and experience have a similar genealogy. The true expert was someone who was humble, who was experienced in their field, but who knew that they did not know everything. This understanding of the expert came about, this new understanding came about because of the abuse of expertise. For example, in World War I, when scientific expertise became involved in the development, say, of chemical weapons. Third point, it was Max Weber who wrestled with this question of the expert and expertise and good government. And as you know, Max Weber was convinced that modernity was moving towards a world in which total bureaucratization was a real danger. That is to say, Max Weber understood that modern complex societies require technical expertise. And this expertise is the secret of the triumph of bureaucracy. The true expert is someone who has precise knowledge, who has access to the files, someone who understands and can grasp the realities of the world. This, Max Weber thought, was a basic ingredient of good government. But there are criticisms of Max Weber's view, and I want to mention just three very briefly. One of them is that we now understand, a century after Max Weber, that there are times when flat, networked organizations, that is, non-bureaucratic organizations, can be more effective and efficient. For instance, in disaster zones, where the distribution of aid and support for people is better done through flat, networked mechanisms rather than bureaucratic mechanisms. Max Weber also supposed that expertise would be monopolized by state institutions. We now know that there can be developed expertise in the field of Gongmin Shihui, in the field of civil society. And thirdly, Max Weber, although he understood that all knowledge is from a perspective, that's what Sachlichkeit is. Objectivity is always from a particular perspective. It's not absolute. Nevertheless, tended to suppose, when he wrote about bureaucracy and expertise, that the knowledge that experts have is somehow outside of time and space, somehow universal, somehow unchallengeable. That is a view that has come to be deeply controversial. Finally, fourth point, what I want to suggest to you is that we should recover the early modern understanding of the expert as someone who is experienced, someone who is the carrier of 智慧, of wisdom, someone who knows that they don't know everything. That understanding of expertise, championed by Werner Heisenberg and others, is, it seems to me today, of fundamental importance in a period where cascading crises are everywhere, where, for example, pestilence like the COVID-19 requires expertise in this old and, I would say, new sense. And there are several reasons, 5 of them in fact, why expertise understood as wisdom is important. First of all, most obviously, within, for example, government institutions, it's important to have experts who warn those who govern that they don't know everything, that they may be mistaken in their prejudices. This is a view of expertise that you can find in the work of the world-famous virologist Peter Piot, a Belgian who was, until recently, the European Commission's advisor on COVID-19. Or it is the view of expertise as a challenger, as a contrarian, the view of Dr. Fauci, who survived the Trump administration and who, in an interview, famously said, Dr. Fauci, that his role during the Trump administration was to be the skunk at a picnic. It's a very American expression. Secondly, expertise can also contribute to the pluralization of institutions. Think of the important role played by universities as custodians of wisdom, of wise understandings of the world, against government and against a business, for instance. Thirdly, expertise in this older, but I'm suggesting newer sense, 21st century sense, can play the role of protector of citizens, of advisor to citizens, of teaching citizens to be wiser in their understanding of the complexities of the world. This third understanding of expertise you can see, for instance, at work in the warnings about biodestruction, about chemicalization, about the dangers of nuclear weapons, and so on. Fourth and related point, in my work I have been emphasizing for some time now the importance of the precautionary principle. Experts, as I understand them, the true expert is someone who has a cautious understanding of the world and the dangers of this world. This is the role played, for example, by experts in the Committee on Climate Change in the United Kingdom. Their job is to keep tabs on government, to ensure that governments progress towards zero emissions. And fifth, and finally, the true expert is someone who is willing to challenge groupthink, even groupthink within the ranks of experts themselves. This idea of the expert as the challenger of groupthink is, of course, indebted to the American psychologist Irving Janis, who warned that the disastrous American invasion in Cuba of the Bay of Pigs, is an example of where experts, military, administrative strategists, and so on, their knowledge was arrogant. They were not sufficiently humble, and they made a terrible mistake. One can see the dangers of groupthink, for example, at work in the near collapse of banking systems in the Atlantic region in 2008 and 2009. I conclude. We live in an age of cascading crises, and it is in this period that expertise, understood as wisdom, people who are experienced in their fields, who know that they don't know everything and warn others that they don't know everything. It's in this period that experts can play a very important, functionally vital role as contrarians within government, as defenders of institutional pluralism, as champions of public awareness and citizen wisdom, who can be agents of precaution. They can issue warnings, and they can be agents who challenge a groupthink. All of these functions are growing more important. I submit to you that good government requires, therefore, the public monitoring role of experts, the importance of experts as champions of 监督社民主, of what I call monitory democracy. 非常感谢. I look forward to hearing your comments and discussions.